Have you ever wondered what Jesus did from Palm Sunday to Easter? Well, stay tuned. Now, while the exact order of events during Holy Week is debated by biblical scholars, nearly all of them do agree on this. Sunday, Palm Sunday, Jesus began his trip to Jerusalem. And nearing the village of Bethphage, he sent two of his disciples to look for a donkey and its unbroken colt and bring them to him. Then Jesus sat on the young donkey and slowly and humbly made his entry into Jerusalem. Jesus and his disciples spent the night in Bethany, a town about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. Monday, the following morning, Jesus returned with his disciples to Jerusalem. And when he arrived at the temple, he began to overturn the tables and clear in the temple of the money changers. Now that evening, Jesus stayed in Bethany again, probably in the home of his friends Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Tuesday, Jesus and his disciples returned to Jerusalem, teaching most of the day. And later that afternoon, Jesus left the city and went with his disciples to the Mount of Olives, which sits due east of the temple and overlooks Jerusalem. It was here that Jesus gave the Olivet Discourse, an elaborate prophecy about the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the age. After a tiring day of confrontation and warnings about the future, Jesus and the disciples returned to Bethany to stay the night. Now, Wednesday, the Bible doesn't exactly say what Jesus did on Wednesday, although biblical scholars believe that after 2 exhausting days in Jerusalem, Jesus and his disciples spent the day in prayer and resting in Bethany in anticipation of the Passover. Maundy, Thursday, Holy Week takes a somber turn. From Bethany, Jesus and Peter and John head to the upper room in Jerusalem to make the preparations for the Passover feast. And that evening, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples as they prepared to share in the Passover. And then Jesus shared the feast of Passover with his disciples. And later, Jesus and those disciples left the upper room and went to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus prayed in agony. And late that evening, Jesus was betrayed with a kiss by Judas and arrested by the Sanhedrin. He was taken to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the whole council had gathered to begin making their case against Jesus. And meanwhile, in the early morning hours, as Jesus' trial was getting underway, Peter denied knowing his master 3 times before the rooster crowed. And then on Good Friday, Judas, the disciple who had betrayed Jesus, was overcome with remorse and hanged himself early Friday morning. Meanwhile, before the 3rd hour, Jesus endured the shame of false accusation, condemnation, mockery, beatings, and abandonment. And after multiple unlawful trials, he was sentenced to death by crucifixion, one of the most horrible and disgraceful methods of capital punishment known at that time. And before Jesus was led away, soldiers spit on him, tormented and mocked him, and pierced him with a crown of thorns. And then Jesus was forced to carry his own cross to Calvary, where again he was mocked and insulted as Roman soldiers nailed him to the cross. Jesus spoke 7 final statements from the cross. And then, about the 9th hour, Jesus breathed his last breath and died. By 6 p.m. Friday evening, Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea took Jesus' body down from the cross and lay it in a tomb. Saturday, Jesus' body lay in its tomb where it was guarded by Roman soldiers throughout the day. And when the Sabbath ended, Christ's body was ceremonially treated for burial, with spices purchased by Nicodemus. And at some time, he descended to hell to preach to the souls in prison and to show himself victorious to the devil. Sunday morning, resurrection morning, Easter. We reach the culmination of Holy Week. The resurrection of Jesus is the most important event of the Christian faith. Early Sunday morning, several women went to the tomb and discovered that the large stone covering the entrance had been rolled away, and the tomb was empty. Jesus indeed is alive. Amen. This has been Coffee with Carney.